It all started on a weekend that I had been looking forward to for months. My ranch, a sprawling property with rolling pastures and dense woods, had always been my sanctuary, a place where I could escape from the trivialities of neighborhood politics and immerse myself in the quiet rhythm of nature. But that weekend, my peace was shattered in a way I could never have anticipated. I noticed her almost immediately. Karen, the infamous HOA enforcer, had somehow found her way onto my property. She wasn't just wandering aimlessly. She had her eyes locked on my large, industrial dumpster near the back of the ranch, clearly calculating how she could claim it for herself or, worse, use it as leverage to issue some arbitrary fine. My first reaction was disbelief. How had someone from the HOA, which technically had no jurisdiction over my property, even set foot on my land? The audacity was breathtaking. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I watched from a safe distance, hidden behind a grove of trees. Karen approached the dumpster like a predator, peering inside, tapping on its metal sides, and muttering to herself about codes, regulations, and the apparent violation of community standards. She had no idea that I was observing her, or that I had cameras strategically placed all over the ranch to document precisely these types of intrusions. Finally, she tried to lift the lid. That's when I decided it was time to act. I walked out calmly, my boots crunching on the gravel path, my voice measured but firm. "Karen," I said, "I believe that belongs to me." She jumped, spinning around with the kind of horror reserved for people caught in the act of something they knew was wrong. Her eyes widened when she recognized me, but it was too late. Karen attempted a feeble bluff. "I was just inspecting. For safety," she stammered, trying to cover her tracks. I raised an eyebrow and crossed my arms. "Inspecting without permission? On private property. That's trespassing, Karen." She looked around nervously, realizing that the cameras were likely recording her every move. Then I decided to add a little pressure. I activated my security alarm system, which caused a loud, piercing siren to fill the ranch. A neighbor, whom I had discreetly informed beforehand, arrived with their camera phone, documenting Karen's frantic attempt to explain herself. The chaos of her movements, the flailing arms, and the increasingly desperate excuses were almost cinematic in their absurdity. But the climax came when she tried to drag the dumpster toward the property line, presumably to remove evidence, or to make some symbolic point. She was barely halfway when the uneven terrain caught the edge of the dumpster, and it toppled, spilling trash all over the ground. Karen's shriek of frustration echoed across the ranch. I couldn't help but feel a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. She had not only trespassed but had made a spectacle of herself, and in the process, damaged her own credibility. By the time law enforcement arrived, called quietly by my neighbor to ensure the situation didn't escalate further, Karen was frantic, trying to explain why she had been on my property and why she had attempted to take my dumpster. Her story was shaky at best. I calmly provided the footage from my cameras, demonstrating her trespass and her attempted theft. The officers listened patiently, barely concealing their amusement as they advised Karen about the seriousness of her actions. The fallout was swift and decisive. Karen received a formal warning, a trespassing citation, and, most importantly, a humiliating note that her HOA privileges would be reviewed. The news spread quickly through the community. By Monday, her attempts to assert authority on other properties were met with eye rolls, laughter, and polite refusals. Everyone knew what had happened at my ranch that weekend, and Karen had become a cautionary tale of overreach and audacity. In the end, I learned a few things that weekend. First, preparation is everything. Security cameras, strategic allies, and a little patience can turn even the most audacious intruder into a source of public amusement. Second, some people simply underestimate the resolve of property owners who are willing to defend their land. And finally, no amount of HOA rules, self-righteousness, or community spirit can protect someone from the consequences of blatant trespass. As I stood on my porch that evening, surveying the wreckage of the toppled dumpster and the neat rows of my restored pasture, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Karen had learned a lesson in humility, respect, and the dangers of assuming authority where none exists. And as the sun set over my ranch, I knew one thing for certain. My land, my rules, and my peace would remain undisturbed by her or anyone else.